Hello everybody. So I wanted to do a video about my 3D printing resin experiments that I've been doing. And I've been doing them on my own group build from, gosh, when was it, 3 years ago probably? The Tiger 1 thing I did for the 75th Tiger. I ended up having 2 kids and moving through all of that, and I never finished mine, and here it is. It's 6730 Dragon's Vitman Tiger kit. I wanted to do it as a brand new Befales rolling out of the factory, and that required transport tracks, the inner flanges of the wheels, and the folded up fenders. These are all things that aren't made by Dragon in plastic. So right away I was looking with David Barden about what had been out there for years. So let's say Model Caston had done a set of inner wheel flanges that's really out of scale and super lacking in detail, and I grabbed that at a model show and I didn't like it, and I had to work on my own solution for the wheels. So I happened to have a 3D model of the Tiger completely, so I was able to just grab those flanges, shrink them down to 35th scale, and then I uploaded them to Shapeways. So this is the double wheel hub. So you can buy these right now on Shapeways. My company name on Shapeways is Slap Ferret Miniatures, because Slap Ferret is my video game company and I just use that. But so these are measured exactly off real ones, and unfortunately to get the depth that you see here, I wish I would have primed them so you could see it, but there's depth in here. So to get that, with the Dragon part, you actually have to trim back that center cylinder there. And there's really no easy way to do it. You just kind of have to scrape at it with a hobby knife and then sand it flat until this fits. Now I did make these with a peg that inserts into there, so there's no lineup problems. It's just you kind of fit it. And I kind of just eyeballed it, unfortunately, but it's good. But now I have to match all the other ones to this. I'm thinking about trying to make a different one that doesn't require that, but you wouldn't be able to have, like I said, the depth, because there's a lot of inner detail. But I'm sorry about the plastic, because you can't really see it. And then the other one is this one, which is much, much easier. As you can see, this flat goes against the wheel hub. So all you have to do is scrape off a few bolts of the Dragon piece, and then you can just slap this one on there. So I did this at least 2 years ago. Anybody who's in my Tiger Facebook group or anywhere has seen these, and you can buy them. They're a little pricey, but that's Shapeways, that's not me. But funny enough, I lost one of these that I made. I've only made 2 of these. I made all of these. I lost one of these in my office somewhere, so I'm either going to have to make a new one or find the other one. So I'm going to get to that in a minute. But so I handled the wheel flange issue. Now the fenders, I had on the same model, so I uploaded those to Shapeways, and then I told everybody, hey, I uploaded these, we should try them. And unfortunately, one other person besides me did try them, and they have some issues. So these are literally to scale, to 35th scale, so they are incredibly flimsy, and they warped. This should be at a perfect 90 degree. This should be 90 degrees up from this, and this should not have like a warble in it. It does. The details are good, except for the wing nut didn't come out, which I have since decided not to mold in there. But one of them, which was one of these rear ones, these, by the way, I also didn't notice at the time, I made late. You see these 3 welded things here, that's for welded to the hull flaps, which were later. I'm making an early tank, so I have since remedied that. But just the other one of these was really out of whack, and I tried to like bend it a little and it snapped, so I lost the folded up piece, and I was like, ugh. And this is after we had moved, so last year sometime. But the detail on them is fantastic. They're 100% to scale. But because even when you do these through Shapeways, they didn't work correctly, I figured I needed to modify the amount of thickness away from 100% 35th scale and figure out what Dragon had done, and basically take my real measurements and match them with Dragon stuff, and then get somewhere in the middle. So this is Dragon's piece for the front fenders. I've obviously used the old, this is from like the original late kit that came out in like 2005, this piece. It's in like every Dragon kit. And you can use it if you have photo etch, but so I used this and I measured their front fenders, and their front fenders are 1 millimeter thick. The real ones, by the way, are nowhere near that. Like they're not even close. There you can see the two together. This is what they actually are. Now that lip isn't even the actual thickness on these Tiger fenders. It's a flat steel plate with like a little lip bolted to the bottom of it, and Dragon just did the whole thing millimeter thick. So what I decided to do was use the millimeter measurement and make the widest part, where the little lip comes down in the front, here a millimeter, and then I would just make the other part as thick as I needed to make them sit flat and not look stupid. So I waited, I guess, almost a year, and then my wife decided to buy me an Anycubic Photon for my birthday last week or 2 weeks ago now, and so now I can print resin at my house. And I have no idea how close to the actual level of detail that Shapeways does that I could get. I don't even know what they're using for this, because one thing is that there's no support marks on these, like they're perfectly smooth everywhere. It might be SLS printing. I won't bore anybody with 3D printing jargon, but that just means it doesn't need supports, and it's made out of like a vinyl. I have no idea, but I know there's no supports on these, and mine do, so let's get into what mine look like. Alright, so this is my final print. I have them all next to me. 10, 12 versions of this, and some of it was just because I was being stubborn. At one point, I rotated them on the file kind of the wrong way, which made printing them harder, and I never fixed it. I just kind of left it and then kept trying to make that work. I'll explain that as much as I need to. I don't want to bore anybody with just 3D printing stuff, but let's check out the detail on what I was able to get with the Anycubic Photon, which is a home resin printer that costs roughly $220. Okay, so here's the top. Now, parts of this one will be on the kit, so you can see where the fender starts, where the hinges are. So there's my hinges, this hinge here. One thing I'm not 100% as happy with as I was hoping to be is this hinge between the side and the main plate. I didn't exaggerate it as much. I exaggerated it a little, but it's actually still more in scale than the Dragon part is. And it doesn't pick up terribly well, but it is there enough for me to not want to rebuild it again. And then the little locking thing, I cut off the wing nuts, and now I've pretty much done it like Dragon does it, where it's just molded in, but I molded it into place there. You won't be able to see much of the detail on the underneath side, and part of the annoying part about this 3D printing thing is all these supports. So as you can see, this is what I ended up with to get it to print straight. So that's all cleanup. Now, I'm going to demonstrate how it is to clean this up, so I did a bunch of tests trying to get as few of these as possible, but that causes warping. And then you can tell it how far to insert them in, and that causes divoting if they're too far in, but if they're not far in enough, the print fails. Because if you didn't know it, it's being printed upside down. So on this build plate, there's a picture of each layer on this screen, and then the UV light gets let through each layer, and it hardens to this plate that vertically goes like this. So this is the first layer that printed, and so these supports have to be built down to hold all this stuff that's going to happen in the future. And I've been lucky, I've had almost no problems, but I would try to get away with stuff because I knew that if I was going to help other scale modelers use this file ever, or even for my own just cleanup, I didn't want to deal with a ton of crazy imperfections, which there are, but I'm going to deal with it. So the rear one, I have one of Dragon's here. Sorry about the focusing issues, I didn't plan this video terribly well. There's the Dragon part and there's my part. Again, the hinge, I feel like it blends in a little bit on the side of that rib, but it is there and it is more to scale than Dragon's part. This is a late, this is an early. One of the few things I really don't like about this fender that I've made is I don't know if it shows up. Where the square is cut out, if you look on the very edges of that top bar, it looks a little stringy, like it was imperfect. It didn't quite print perfectly. I'm not going to worry about it right now, because to put a support in there to make it print perfectly it wouldn't be clean upable. Like, do you see how thin that is? That's like stretched sprue thin. It's crazy thin. So luckily, I just let that stuff be and it printed okay. But the main problem I was having, because I rotated them this way, where the hinges are up here and this is here, I was having trouble getting this to print flat. And I'll show you an error. This is another print from like the last couple series I was doing. And if you can see, it sort of bends up over here. I was dealing with like little imperfections like that. So if you look at it from straight on, it's not quite right. There's a little drooping here and then a little like up play there. I just had to add a little bit more support. So if you look right in the front, there's a couple more. So how am I supposed to clean this up, you may ask? And I'll show you all the errors too. So let's see. This is one that was much more errored, similar to the last one I just showed you that was kind of bonky. But alright, so this is how I've been going about this, and it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but so I kind of just come in here, and this is before the resin is cured, so you're supposed to put it in the sun for like 10 minutes, but I have not done that because these supports are weaker at this phase. So I'm kind of just chopping at it at the bottom because they're not very thick. And I can actually kind of rock the part out and start ripping the supports off the base because the fender and the base are pretty strong, but the supports are pretty weak. So I just cut it out like that. So then you're kind of left with, you can see where the other supports were, this kind of pimply thing, and then the ones that are not gone yet, I just push them off. So that's no big deal. The problem is I'm not sure if that puckering you're seeing is caused by like the spot where they connect is, let me try to catch the light on that a little bit better. There you go. I'm not sure if that's caused when it's being built, if that's pulling there, or if that's literally just divots, but it doesn't just look like divots from where they were. So how I'm dealing with that is not a finessing kind of thing. I'm just going to take a sander and hit it as hard as I can without damaging it. You know, this isn't going to be very exciting to show you, but this is how I've done it in previous tests. Just sanding the shit out of this side of the fender. Now, if you look at it, I'm not going to keep going. So let me show you something I did here. Alright, so on this side, there's actually a curve right here. And that fits in to the piece of the hull on Tiger. The front plate, the glacis plate, actually has a curve like that. So this was actually modeled with a little indent from here and then rounded to here so that it slots into the front of the Dragon Tiger and sits where it's supposed to sit. So I can't sand that away. And if you see, there's kind of two depths there. It gets thinner so that it actually sits, when it locks in, it should sit down as low as it's supposed to. So I had to worry about that too, because if it was a millimeter thick, I couldn't stick it on top of it, because even with Dragons, you see how you have these two levels of the thing going on here, like it pops up a little bit over that plate. I had to mimic that. So that's basically cleanup on the thing. So right now it looks a little crappy, but again, it's going to be super glued here like that, so you're not really going to have access to the bottom. But that being said, I'm not happy about it because the way Shapeways did it, theirs was perfect, and if somebody had, for whatever reason, wanted to glue it folded up in the front, you could have. But detail-wise, the side one here has all of the correct bolts and such. Like that little knob in the middle there is where the bolt for this wing nut is welded. So I've never seen that on the kit as far as I know. I know Ryefield put some detail onto their fenders, but I don't know if they went this far. And I do have, like, see, this is the problem with this whole setup. The correct, like, rivets and stuff are down here, or whatever they use to connect this little ridge with the folded down flap on the real Tiger. They're here, but they get used so close to these supports that I'm basically losing them in the process. But luckily these are shiny and pretty, and that's what you're going to see. You're never going to look, like, unless you pick up my model, in which case you get your hand slapped. So we're dealing with pimpling here and a loss of the detail that I bothered to make. Now there's a couple other ways I could try to do it. I haven't yet. I could literally print it this way, like laying on the bed, maybe with some supports off the bottom, because you don't want to print it just flat because you get this kind of warping thing where it kind of flattens out down there. But if I printed it straight up, it would take, this is how big the current prints are, wouldn't actually take that much longer. Maybe it would take an hour longer, and then I wouldn't have any of this here. They'd be perfectly smooth. But is that really worth it? Because I would rather the print be small, because right now this thing takes about 3.5 hours to 4 hours, depending on how I set up the kit of the 4 fenders. But I think that detail's pretty good. I did exaggerate these hinges so that they would actually show up, because when I printed them, this was the first print I did, and I think the hinges kind of got lost in this one. They were a little too small. But also this is how default supports made by the software worked, and I couldn't get the fenders out without breaking everything. Like, it's so hard, and there's so many of these. So this whole process has been figuring out how few of those I needed to use. But when you figure out the supports, and like I said, I don't love the angle that this is printed at, because the amount of supports and where they have to be is dictated by the angle, but it takes less time. Plus this is perfectly smooth, which is what you're going to see, as are the sides. Maybe I'll try a vertical one just to see what happens. But the whole point I'm showing this to people is that this is a home 3D printer, and it takes a couple hours, and boof, aftermarket. So digital aftermarket is really a thing if it takes off. I've had discussions about this with people, but I know not everyone has a perfect 1-to-1 scale model of a Tiger that they can pull parts off of, shrink, and print. But stuff like this, geometric stuff, is not the hardest stuff to make, and since you don't have to do much of what I have to do with it in the video game industry, it would be a lot easier for other people to pick it up. So, back to my wheel hubs. So this is what you get from Shapeways. Again, as I said, I had 8 of the single wheel flange that connects it to its secondary outer wheel, and then I had 8 of these. I did 2 of, so you have them on the outside, and the other 8 are on the inside. I did 2 of these, lost 1, oh no. The other 8 I have. So I'm like, crap, this is like $20 from Shapeways. And as you can see, I have now solved my fender problem with Shapeways. That just seemed like a headache, because when I was doing the fenders through Shapeways where I have my own printer, I would have to, every time I would have tried to troubleshoot that, I would have had to have re-uploaded it, rebought it for $20, and then had them resent here. But these are all my Tiger fender samples, and I did them all in my house in a row. You know, so I did it, 10, 12 times. I would say, nope, not working. Scrape off the print, dump it, tweak some things, and then do it again right away. So I couldn't troubleshoot the fenders. So now that I had that ability, I don't want to buy another one of these things to finish my stupid Tiger, because I have the transport Freol tracks, I have the fenders sorted now, I have the muzzle cover sorted, which was a Panzer art piece, so I've got everything pretty much where I wanted, except I lost a fender, so I was like, okay, or sorry, I lost a hub. So what can the Photon do with the hubs? So I did a couple tests on there. Inconclusive thus far, because if you look, these flanges have 6 holes in them. You can see them right there. That's where, the bolts go through to connect it to the wheels. And that's something I need to have on there, especially since I have 7 of these. You can see the holes are in every one, and there is no weird support material or anything. Shapeways did a really good job on these. It did, the sprue thing I have did warp a little bit, but that's fine. Didn't affect the parts. So I've done 3 tests with the hub, exact same file. I downloaded it back off Shapeways and then ran it through the Photon. And this was the first one, and as you can see, it prints fairly well. I added a few supports to a few of these because I was worried they would collapse, but they didn't, so in the future I would remove those. You can see there's extra stuff. On the Shapeways one, there's just the one peg to feed into the wheel. And I was like, well crap, everything's going to melt if I don't put supports in there. But the detail looks okay. There's a little bit of like gooiness in there, but I did print them flat, which people tell you not to do. This is right in the build plate. But no holes in the flange that I'm trying to replace that's here. You can kind of see indents and stuff, and there are a few indents for the locking lug. There's like this piece that Dragon does in PE that like sits in here, which I'm not going to bother using because but that showed up, but the holes did not show up. So I was using 8x anti-aliasing on the Photon, which basically just means it blurs pixels. So real quickly, the Photon's layers are on an LCD screen like a phone, and the phone has a minimum or maximum resolution, and you can blur the pixels to create smoother transitions, but you will inevitably lose detail by turning anti-aliasing up or down, or up rather. So I turned it off, and then I reprinted. So this is the exact same file with 0 anti-aliasing instead of 8 times. And a little bit crispier, no pixelation or any kind of artifacting, but again, no holes. And I was like, well, crap, maybe this thing just can't print tiny holes. And then I had removed those spare supports in here, and it still printed perfectly. So then I had the idea, what if I print it sideways? Maybe that would somehow work. I created this file where I set them all up at like a 40-degree angle, maybe 35, I don't remember exactly. And so there's the spoke that you feed into the wheel. And I was like, well, that's going to turn into mush. So I added a few more supports on a few of them. And you can see what happened here, how they died. They literally did just, there's nothing for them to hold on to. So since it's built upside down, if there's nothing for the shape to cling to, it will just turn to mush. And that's what happened here. You see how there's really nothing until it got close enough to the main hub, which had come from this post, and then it started to build correctly. But down here, where I did have one further, another extra one, they mostly built. And if you look, the holes are there. So I was correct. If you build them sideways, you can get tiny little holes. So this is in progress yet. I think what I'm going to do is maybe, I was talking to some people, and you can add kind of like sacrificial sprue gates, basically. Like imagine a sprue gate that sticks out right from the wheel. What I don't want to do, because I'm doing 3D printing, is I don't want to have to sand a shape into a perfect circle. I'd rather have the perfect circle. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but I'm going to try to keep printing them. And there's no point in printing one, because you have to fill the resin vat, and they print the same speed no matter how many you do horizontally, like in X or Y. Z is the only thing that matters, so like how high up it is. I mean, it uses more resin, but... So it can be done on the Photon, and I'm going to keep working on that. So what that means for people that don't have them, I'm going to upload the final STL of the Fenders without the supports. Like this is the exact file that the Photon takes, but I'll just upload the STL before I do the supports back up to Shapeways, so you can buy the newer, thicker, sturdier, slides into a Dragon Kit glacis plate version of my Fenders. And they will actually be better than these, but you'll have to order them, pay for them, and wait for them, whereas this costs like 15 cents worth of resin when I do it, so I can do a ton of them. But I would rather do stuff myself than pay to have my own 3D files shipped back to me slightly better. So I'm trying to find the sweet spot of like, how much crap can I put up with and do it myself, because I would rather do it myself because it's kind of a cool feeling to do it yourself. So I'll put the early and lates, because these, if you can tell with that hole cut, are for early, so you'd have to have the frame on the back of your Tiger, and then this would just glue right underneath it. But I'm super happy with the detail. I know a lot of people have used these. Martin Kovac used a Photon on one of his builds, which reminded me that I wanted a resin printer, and I forgot they'd gotten cheap, because back when I was living in Madison, they were like $3,000 for a Form 2, and now they're a couple hundred for a Mars or for a Photon. And it's really easy. I'm not going to do a demo of it here, but it's just sitting off to my side. You know, I have this gray resin. I just dump this stuff in there. I upload my files. It's not loud. It doesn't smell that bad. You can leave the resin in there for a couple days, so you can do like multiple things. I'm shocked at how easy it is. The only hang up I have is doing supports takes a little while, and then the cleanup thing. Like, do I wish the Fenders were perfect? Yeah. Like here's one I sanded off already. You can see that there's like kind of, it's white and stuff, but like when this is painted and glued to the tank, you're never going to see that. So it's kind of like dealing with like a resin upgrade set. But as we move forward, I'm sure that there will be printers that can do what these Shapeways guys do. If this is SLS, which is self-supporting material, that won't be cheap for a while, but it's fascinating, and I'm very happy with the results of the Fender project finally looking good. Because as far as I know, the only way to do this up until now has been photo etch or something. I'm not sure how other people have done it, but I've always wanted to do one of these with these puppies folded up and these hubs. So that's pretty much all I got. These will be, I'll put a link when these are up. I'll add it to this video. When the video goes up, these probably won't be live, but contact me if you're interested in doing them yourself. I've talked to a few people online about me getting them this photon file. And I was debating selling digital files for people to print, but I've been very, very, very advised not to do that because people think that once the stuff's out there, no one will ever bother to pay me any money. But I'm not trying to make a living off this, so I haven't really decided how to do it yet. I would rather sell the files digitally and make a couple dollars, and then people could print as many as they wanted to, as opposed to people having to pay $20 for a set of Fenders. Like, that's just stupid. If I sold the digital file for $5, you know, people would be a lot more likely to buy the stupid thing. But these printers have to become like heavily saturated within the community for that to make sense. So I haven't really decided. If you have opinions, let me know. I would like to make money off what I do, but I made these for me, and mostly what I want to do is share it with other people and maybe make a tiny bit off of it. Because I don't know how common people are going to want this, and I'm already getting requests from other people I know, like, hey, could you build a whatever? I'm like, well, maybe. But again, with tigers, I happen to have a 1-to-1 3D model of one that I spent 2 years building, so I can do anything with a tiger for sure. But I don't have a reference for other vehicles yet, but it's an exciting thing, and I will post something with this when these are... I'll clean up the good ones and UV cure them and glue them on and try to get the wheels and tracks fitted and then show it off a little bit more appropriately. And I wish I had that for this video, but I finally just stopped like the last little bit of filming on the Martyr series because I work stupid amounts and the kids, and I'm not going to wait. I would rather just talk about this as is. Thanks for still being out there. Sorry about the Martyr series. I'm still here. But I've been spending my time trying to get the 3D printing stuff to work correctly, and it's super cool. If you have the money, I really suggest getting one.